Good morning and welcome. I am sitting here right now. It's almost 6 o'clock in the morning. It is November 24th. It is Monday. Thanksgiving is just a couple days away from here. And I'm actually recording two of these things this morning. I have the energy. I have the notes already on my screen behind me. I'm just going to knock everything out. Boom, boom, boom. This here is my 80th edition of a Joe's Book Review, coming from my office/cave in my home. And one of these days I'll clean up all the detritus behind me, but we'll see what happens. And here, I have an interesting one for you, with two stories to start us off. But first, what I'm going to say here is, so this is Shawn Coss, wrote this book called It's All in Your Head. This is the second dose edition. And basically, Shawn Coss is an artist. And he's made these mental health depictions in this book. Okay? It's almost... I'm wondering if I would almost say this is like a graphic novel, in a way. I mean, it's not novel so much like it has a throughput story, like you read from the beginning to the end and you're following a main character, but it is kind of like an anthology of different mental illnesses and how people are coping with them, how they're even defined, and they're coming to you. So it's a book of mental illnesses, and what he does here is he'll take a black ink photo and put the picture on one side, and then, so it's like that. So this one was postpartum depression. So he has a picture depicting postpartum depression. You know, it's an illustration, both literally and figuratively, of the illness. And then in the write-up, he might talk about a degree of the illness, which also is how he does the image as well, because, put it this way, postpartum depression could have so many different effects regarding the same illness on different people. But he can only draw one picture. So he'll pick out the one that means something to him more and illustrate that. Now, on the reverse side, in all the words, is the dialogue. Usually a description of the mental illness, perhaps even citing a certain medical journal, and then a write-up either of a personal experience or a relative who may have suffered from it. You know, it's just something to make the reader kind of realize a little bit of what this illness is for some people out there. Because practically speaking, if you don't have the illness and experience it yourself, it's hard to understand what people are going through who have this kind of thing. So, the first question is, why did I read this? This is story number 1. Bottom line, damn, Facebook got to me. I am a victim. I came up on my feed one day, you know, because Facebook today is truly nothing but advertisements these days. You ever see that? I mean, that is if you're still using Facebook. I scroll through 3 ads on my feed before I even see something from a friend. You know, it's like I'm scrolling down. It's there's a group that I'm a member of. Ad. Another group. One friend. Ad. Fucking meta. Well, this one came up, and I saw some of the pictures, and I didn't X out the corner immediately. You know, I kind of paused on it. I was like, oh, this is kind of intriguing, which some of us already know is kind of the death knell to your scrolling, because now the algorithm is like, oh, look, he stopped. Let's give him more of this stuff and give him this more often. And now it showed up every day. And I was intrigued. I didn't click on the buy it now option. I wanted it to kind of simmer, to test to see, do I really want it? You know, or if I let some time pass along, maybe I was like, who needs that kind of crap? I even showed the ad to my wife one night, and she kind of thought it was interesting as well. And I told her I was considering buying it, but she didn't react with one of those like, why would you? And note, I was not looking for permission. I was literally testing the waters even to see if I still wanted it. And then add. 1 month later, I bought it. So, they got me. And when it eventually came in, I actually picked up the signed edition. So I'm like, shit, if I'm going to go this far, why not? And then what we proceeded to do, because she was interested in it, and I was going to read it, I started to read this book to her at night as we kind of like were putting ourselves down and getting into bed. Now, I've been told, and I tend to think myself, that I have somewhat of a pretty decent voice. In fact, it's what I'm doing is trying to build on that for this channel with my audiobooks and other recordings and such that I narrate. And I can get that low, resonant timbre in the voice if I choose to, which makes for pretty decent pillow talk, if you ask me. So, she would take off her glasses and settle down on her side of the bed, and I would read through a few pages. And as I'm reading through it, she's on my side, I'd kind of angle the book in her direction so I can read it, and she could see the black ink illustrations that are on the page. So as I'm going through descriptions and stories, she's seeing the visual and she can connect the two in her own mind. And when I would look down and see that she got sleepy and her eyes were closed, I'd put my bookmark in the book, she'd shut off the light for the night, and we get our rest. And that worked out pretty well. I mean, it was a nice, special little couples event that we had. And the funny thing is, she's half hypochondriacal herself, so it came across almost like a menu for her. It's like, oh, maybe I have that one now. Like I need that in my life. Or she'd say like, oh, I know that person's kind of like that. Maybe. So, we had this little event going for us. And it involved reading a book and her just being a part of the audience. So, go me, finding something out of little things. So enough with the preamble stories. Let's dive right into this one. The book is actually separated into a couple different sections within it. Okay. The first one's called Mentation. Okay, it's a collection of what Shawn Coss calls his Inktober series on illnesses and disorders. Okay. There's no page numbers in the book for his portfolio, so I had to guesstimate on this one. It appears like this first section has like 45 pages with the picture on the left and the words on the right. In between that, there's probably another 30 pages in the middle where there's like a second drawing, almost like another version of the sketch, or sometimes even original ones that weren't mentioned or spoken of earlier. And these are single-page drawings with the disorder just kind of labeled on the bottom. Like, for instance, here, generalized depression or histrionic personality disorder. And he talks about them. In fact, I'm going to put up here, real quick, one example. So he's got anorexia nervosa. And with the main picture on the left, he talks about the definition from the National Institute of Mental Health. And then he discusses a close relation or a close relative that he witnessed undergoing this ordeal. At the end, there's a discussion how the design was chosen to depict someone with the condition, where the image depicts someone holding onto and grabbing fat from their malnourished body. And then a second image, which came up in those 30 pages, depicts someone measuring their waistline. And they're probably measuring it in a form of disgust in what's clearly an emaciated thinness. So for a select number of these, you actually get 2 images. And that's what we see throughout the book. It depicts the following disorders, by the way. There's like 75 in all. Okay, he goes through ADD and ADHD, agoraphobia, Alice in Wonderland syndrome, which is an interesting one, anorexia nervosa, these are ones I should have practiced. Apodemnophobia, arachnophobia, athlazar, no, that's not what it is. Athazagoraphobia, athazagoraphobia, autism spectrum disorder, automatonophobia, avoidant personality disorder, bipolar disorder, blennophobia, body dysmorphia, body integrity identity disorder, bogeyphobia, borderline personality disorder, bulimia nervosa, Capgras syndrome, cherophobia, chronophobia, claustrophobia, conduct disorder, Cotard's delusion, choleraphobia, delirium disorder, delusional disorder, dependent personality disorder, depersonalization disorder, dermatillomania, disinhibited social engagement disorder, dissociative identity disorder, ecclesiophobia, there's another one, isoptrophobia, emerophobia, epistemophobia, factitious disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, histrionic personality disorder, hoarding disorder, hylophobia, insomnia, intermittent explosive disorder, kenophobia, major depressive disorder, misophonia, Munchausen by proxy, narcissistic personality disorder, necrophobia, non-suicidal self-injury disorder, nyctophobia, obsessive-compulsive disorder, ophidiophobia, panic disorder, paranoid schizophrenia, pediophobia, philophobia, pica disorder, postpartum depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, pyrophobia, schizophrenia disorder, scopophobia, smile mask syndrome, social anxiety disorder, somnophobia, Stockholm syndrome, substance abuse disorder, taphophobia, thalassophobia, tocophobia, trichotillomania, trypophobia, trypophobia, and verbophobia. Sorry for listing all those out, but that's what you'll find when you go through this. So it's pretty exhaustive of a list, and I'm sure not the whole list. So then it moves on to a second section, which he calls his Armor Up series. And now you've got 40 or so drawings that also depict various mania, depression, ADHD, and the like. They show a symbolic view of an emotion while in the thrall of dealing with a specific illness. And just so you know what that's like, he has this thing here, which he calls putting on a happy face. And it's kind of, he tells a story about how some women are expected to smile more because it's the proper thing to do in society's eyes. So he kind of like threw this in there, showing us someone's putting on their mask and forcing themselves to smile, even though they don't want to, because they think that society might think that they need to. So this whole section has examples and illustrations like that. Another one that I have here is, he has one that it's called Release. It's a figure that's holding up like 3 balloons, and the balloons have words on them, and they're titled Uncertainty, Depression, Self-Doubt. And initially, the emotional balloons are kind of like wound around a wrist. But the piece talks about the author learning to let go of these and not be weighed down by them. And by being balloons, they should visibly be easy to let go of. So while these pages don't deal specifically with the disorders themselves like the prior pages, they are more illustrations and background of people who are trying to deal with them and what that could be like. Or what someone who has these disorders may be like, that you may help to assist them, if that's even possible. And finally, it ends with a few illustrations of some common known items. He's got 2 pages of his depictions of the 7 deadly sins, and then the final 6 pages deal with the 12 signs of the zodiac. So you're getting to see more and more of what Shawn Coss, the artist, is capable of while you go through his portfolio. Now, onto my impressions of this. Overall, I think it was just fine. It took me a while to realize that everything was going to be done with only black ink. I think I was expecting to see some other colors flying through the illustrations. Obviously not bright ones, but maybe reds or even sepias or whatever to highlight certain sections of the drawing. But when they didn't appear, I resigned myself that this was the medium that I was to expect to see for the remainder of the book. Which, to all intents and purposes, was just fine. Okay? It was my expectations. And expectations that are derived from no basis whatsoever can be crippling to the observer when they're not met. But I was able to get past that relatively quickly. But one note, all the illustrations can be a tad nightmarish. You wouldn't want to be in the vicinity of any one of these things, even in a well-lit or public area where they're walking around. Which, I suppose, being that way is meant to bring out the dread of the conditions and give it closer to our understanding. And it absolutely adds to the sense of macabre as this when you go through it page by page. On to my next point. I was actually able to get my hands on several copies of this. Okay, I bought the first one through the Facebook ads. Damn Facebook. And I got that, and like I said, I got the signed edition. But then I noticed that other people were reselling them on the side. So I got one of these at a lower price than was available through the website. Which, as a funny aside, the website was offering copies, and it had these shop pay payment plans available. So the soft cover was available for $45, or you can do 2 shop pay payments of $22.50 each. The signed hardcover was available for $75, or 4 shop pay payments of $18.75 each. But how about this one? An unsigned hardcover was available for $50, or 4 shop pay payments of $25 each. Which, if you're an accountant like I am, that's $100 of payments for a $50 book. So, simply amazing. Although, I will say that it's funny that people are trying to sell this book out there, signed, on eBay, for more than double the cost of getting it directly from the author. And here's a couple listings I got here. This $75 book plus shipping is trying to be sold for like $149.99 or even $170. And people out there just trying to rip you off. So therefore, the ability I got to get cheaper copies out there, we actually gifted one to my wife's mother. So it kind of worked out to do so. And then my own dollar cost averaging of the different products has decreased. My third comment on this. This one occurred one particular night when I went through the few art pieces in a row, and they had, whatever the descriptions were. But during the write-up of these disorders, the author talks about things that he had to personally deal with, or a disorder that he has that he's struggling with. But I could swear that one of the night, as I'm going through these, multiple pages in a row was like, I suffer from this disorder. And the next one, as one who suffers from this disorder, I realize that, blah, blah, blah. And a few pages later, and I was diagnosed with this disorder. And we kind of like, my wife and I both laughed. And I was like, what, you have all these simultaneously? And I was just no. I mean, you can't personalize an entire phobia-centered book. And one, I for one, who I believe doesn't have anything in this thing, I have a problem believing someone is personally associated with so many of the disorders, like personally has it or something like that. And, you know, we had a small laugh about it, but then continued and finished the book. But I have to say, you know, it did pull me a little bit out of the investment in the magic of what he was writing and I was reading. So, I mean, like I said, we went on, we finished the book. I'm fine with it, but it's like, oh, I have this, and I have this, and I have this. I was like, I don't know if that's true. Or even if it is true, I'm like, really? I don't know how to end this part of the commentary, but it's just like, it was just one of those things. I was like, come on. So now for my last comment on this book, and I'm going to have to defend him just to touch on this as well. Of course, I'm going to be personally involved or personally attuned to one or two of the disorders that are on here due to family and close friends. Okay, probably one of the reasons why the book does what it does is so you can kind of like have a further connection or even show the person something that you've read about it and get their take on it. But on the page of autism spectrum disorder, okay, I was very curious to see what Shawn Coss was going to say about this one. My youngest boy is autistic. He's currently 5.5 years old. And we are lucky he's very high functioning and his future may be bright. In fact, I have him interested in recording audiobooks. He's doing it himself. His teachers love to see his progress on his reading and his pronunciation when I share with them the videos that I make of his reading. Not videos of him reading like you'll see him, but just like I do here, an edited version of his audio work. In fact, he's got a couple of audiobooks right now on this channel. There's a whole new playlist out there that I called My Children's Own Audiobooks. My oldest has about 3 that he's been doing over the years. And now this one, my Kane, has about 4 or 5 of them. In fact, he really likes these Mo Willem books. And he's been going through them. In fact, this is one of the ones that he first started reading out loud to, which made me so freaking proud. In fact, while I was sitting here typing these notes last night, he walked into the door of my office and was like, "Can I record the audiobook?" And I was like, I can't say no. So I have my studio kind of in the corner here. We sat down, we recorded it, and I'll start editing it soon, and I'm going to drop the new one out there. But going back to Shawn Coss. Here's the image that he drew. Okay? In the explanation, he talks about how it is a spectrum and that people could be anywhere on the spectrum along the way. And there's just no way to make one image and depict the spectrum, which I defend him on. That is 100% accurate. Okay? So he's got to take one aspect of it and try to portray it in one image. So this image here is depicting a child, and the child you see has his mouth sewn shut. Okay, so he has like an inability to speak. And while it's not physically true, the essence is the inability to say what the child wants to say to the world. If you see down below in the depiction, the fingers are just clawing at the floorboards. Again, a frustration is present, where the inability to communicate properly is making the child angry at the inability. And while the mind is depicted as being just full-blown screaming, there's so much the child wants to convey to the world, but he's kind of like trapped by the disorder, and it's made his ability to let his intentions known is causing almost like a mental anxiety of a form, because it's not being able to get out. And like he said, this is one image, not a representation of autism. So I fully understand what the artist was saying with his work. I got the message. And I, for one, can approve of the message. My wife, on the other hand, she taught autistic people, or people with this, what do you want to call it? Like learning and I don't know why I don't have the word on top of my head, and I didn't write it down. But, regressions, I wish I wrote it down. But she's been dealing with people with these kind of learning abilities for almost 20 years. She wasn't so happy with representation. But I don't know what could have been drawn to convey to someone with so much experience what it would be like. Especially if you're going to take one aspect of it, they might think you're ignoring the other aspects of it. He would almost need to have like an autism series and do 20 or so different images to make someone like her happy about this. I wasn't unhappy with this. But one last caveat. To have a child with autism and have a mother who's taught in that field for most of her career, you couldn't ask for a better woman to be the wife of your child who's on the spectrum. Never in a million years could you find a better one. So, on that note, I'm going to wrap things up. You can check out this guy's website for further technical information. You can find him on the website called anymeansnecessary.com. His name is Shawn Coss, spelled like you see on the title of this video. And as for me, I'm close to be caught up on my book reviews. I got one more sitting there of the Red not gotten around to yet. So it's good to clear off my desk and catch up so I can do things like clean up the office if I need to. I hope this was informative to you. And I hope if you've gotten to the end of this video, you might be so kind as to make this channel one of your saved subscriptions. So, thanks for hearing me. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you soon enough. Bye-bye.